Well, students, having had an overview of the syllabus, let's take up the first topic as to understand what is strategic cost management. If one were to define cost management, strategic cost management, otherwise called as SCM, is a cost management technique that aims at managing costs while strengthening the position of the business. Both the two things are very vital. Managing the cost while simultaneously strengthening the position of the business. They are linked. When we are using the word managing the cost, we are going to see a number of cost management techniques which ensures that costs are under the understanding and the control of as a strategic planning. They are not standalone costs. They are linked to the entire value chain of the organization. The concepts of the cost, which leads to the linkage between the cost incurred and the strategic plans of the organization, is precisely the core subject of strategic cost management. It is because of this that when an organization is managing the cost, it strengthens its own competitive position. It is a process, in fact. Strategic cost management is not a one-time solution or a single dose of a medicine for an issue or a problem, but it is a continuous process combining the decision-making structure with the cost information in order to reinforce the business strategy as a whole. You can talk about business strategy in small compartments, a departmental strategy, segmental strategy, whereas here we are talking in a holistic principle of the total business strategy linked to the cost management, linked to the strategic management. In strategic cost management, the primary importance is given to the constant improvement in the product to provide better quality to its target customers. Look at the focal point of the entire exercise. As we explained at the initial discussions, the entire focus of the strategic cost management is an improvement of the relationship with the customers, targeting the customers of the product or the service provided by the organization, and to ensure that the satisfaction of the customer is on the increase. The relationship with the customer is built up, maintained, and improved upon. Now, that is the focal point of the strategic cost management. Quite obviously, any other management area in the modern business environment focuses only on the customers. It is an essential part. The strategic cost management is an essential part of the value chain that covers every facet. The value chain covers almost all facets of the organizations. At the input receiving stage, that is the purchases, and then you make designs of what product is to be made, the actual production operation, the sales, and the after sales service, etc. So therefore, we are talking of a concept which is in fact refers to an ongoing process, a continuous process in any organization, which focuses on the customer satisfaction, which focuses on improving the customer relationship so as to ensure that the value chain of the organization is constantly on this focused area of increased, improved customer satisfactions. If you had to look the entire strategic cost management in terms of various steps involved in that process, we can see in this diagram, it begins with formulating strategies. Remember, they are not standalone steps. Every step is interrelated and it's a continuous one. So therefore, when you are formulating a strategy, you've got already a scope of information that you have obtained from the past, and the business environment helps you to understand what is going to be in the future. Based on that, you have formulated strategies. These strategies are communicated throughout the organization as to how to do a particular aspect, what is to be done, when it is to be achieved, what is the level of quality expected, what is the level of performance expected. And once these are communicated, you then individually, collectively, and holistically develops and implement the tactics. So the term between a strategy and the tactics is a difference between the short term and the long term. Tactics refers to small steps taken up in the short term measure, whereas the aggregation of these tactics becomes a long term strategy. All right. Once these are implemented in terms of various processes, in terms of various tactics, they are into a performance angle which pushes you to develop the controls to ensure that you are going on the right path, in the right path of strategy, and you are not deviating. And if there is any variation, if there is any deviation, they are brought to control. Friends, this concept of cost management is essential to bear in mind when we are going to talk different types of strategic cost management techniques or tools, and especially when we are going to attempt some numerical problems. Why a particular solution is said to be correct is because of this holistic aspect, that is the covering the entire value chain of an organization with a focused attention on the customer satisfaction. The overall strategic cost management refers to a set of actions taken or proposed to be taken, if it is a strategy, by an organization to enhance its performance, both general performance and a specific performance, specific to product quality, specific to product turnover, specific to process, specific to performance of individuals. So you can split the entire organizations into various aspects, various segments, various subsets, and their performance should ultimately conform to the overall general performance of the organizations. Now, in this strategic cost management, the beginning aspect is of cost analysis. Cost analysis, not a standalone aspect, not purely an accounting concept. It is a managerial concept of cost analysis. Analysis in the context of a business environment, analysis in the context of the targeted customers, analysis in the context of the existing competition, and analysis in the context of the resources that the organization has. In fact, this entire topic is so vibrant that almost on every term you come to realize the potential dynamism in these concepts. In fact, the best author who explained these concepts in a more clear manner was the Michael Porter, who's considered to be one of the well-known gurus in management. His famous book, Competitive Advantage, which came in mid-1980s, and till date, it is considered to be a path-breaking book, which tries to give an analytical understanding of the strategic management and leading to that a strategic cost management. So you do the cost analysis. Why do you do the cost analysis? What could be the objective behind the cost analysis? Is to ensure sustainable competitive advantage. The cost analysis is not done for only a small short-term objectives like fixing the product sales price, fixing the budgeted sales, etc. The long-term objective of the cost analysis is to ensure sustainable competitive advantage. Obviously, when you have to ensure sustainable competitive advantage, you have to define the competitive advantage unique to your organization, spell out its components, and then see that all those components are advantageous to you in the long term and sustainable manner, that you have sufficient strength to ensure that competitive advantage is maintained. In simple terms, the competitive advantage would mean the strengthened relationship with your customers, continued preference of the customers to your products or to your services. In a market which is continuously dynamic and continuously innovative and competitive. So therefore, you get a totally new focused meaning to the term sustainable competitive advantage. It's not only you define your competitive advantage. Maybe you have a market share of 20%, 30% once you define a competitive advantage. But sustainable would mean that the competitive advantage continues to be in the future. But obviously, you should and you would appreciate the significance of a continued attention in the process and the cost analysis which has gone behind these sustainable competitive advantage. Once you have this cost analysis, which a focused attention to ensure sustainable competitive advantage, you are in a position to prepare a total cost structure. I mean, this is the basket where you define your cost information. The cost analysis is an analytical aspect which throws out various information, and those information collated, once you are sure that you are able to reach this competitive advantage, you put into real figures and get a structured cost for the entire organization, for the product, for various aspects of its segments. Once you have the cost structure, that helps you to bring about a relationship between various activities within the organization, which is referred by the term known as value chain. The term chain, you understand, is a linked. So when the activities are linked, you can say chain of activities. But these activities are not mere activities for mentioning, but these activities have the characteristic of generating, creating value to the customer, who is going to be the ultimate focus in our life. So we are going to see, of course, what is this value chain activities. Here I would like to refer to a very important book written by one of the well-known modern management accountants, cost consultant, cost management consultant, Vijay Govindarajan, an Indian, who is in India, who is in USA, practicing for the last over 40 years. His book, Strategic Cost Management, by Vijay Govindarajan and Shank. If you happen to get hold of that book, read, where he describes the components of strategic cost management through an extensive analysis of one single industry, that's the paper industry, into three important components: strategic position analysis, value chain analysis, and cost driver analysis. The cost driver divided into two components: structural cost drivers and executional cost drivers. Remember, strategic cost management is not only about cost control, which is obviously a part of any strategy, but also about managerial decisions. What decisions need to be taken to define your sustainable competitive advantage? What decision need to be taken to structure your cost? And what decision need to be taken as to ensure that what are the value chain activities you will be performing or deleting or adding? So with this brief definition of strategic cost management, let's try to see how does the strategic business environment exist. Now, the word strategy is quite a challenging word for you to understand in the context of a business, and more specifically in the context of cost management. Now, in any business environment, there are two types of angles. One is the input side and the outputs. Now, you need to have a strategies for input. You need to have a strategy for outcomes. Of course, combined together becomes the total strategy of the business. Now, strategic of inputs, you need to have a strategy as to how do you handle globalization. These are the information. Volatility of the competition, volatility of the market, volatility of the demand, volatility of the supply chain, the suppliers from whom you are going to purchase, and the competitiveness among them, and the price pressure. So these are with regard to the inputs. Be it you buy a raw material like steel, be it you buy raw material like petroleum, be it you buy raw material like human capital, expertise. Say, for example, the industry in which you are involved, artificial intelligence is one of the important inputs. Then you can appreciate this, that the strategic inputs for an artificial intelligence as a software that you would like to put in your business processes. Tremendous amount of globalized market exists in case of artificial intelligence, with almost every single day innovative attempts, innovative practices, innovative understandings are being pushed in. Therefore, there is a heavy amount of volatility. The obsolescence in such industry like artificial intelligence software can be very fast. Mere simple program can make your total software outdated. Then competitiveness, volatility leads to competitiveness, and then price pressure. Because since this artificial intelligence software involves human capital, they come at a huge cost. To acquire such an input, you have got to determine a proper price at which you are going to buy, because your decision to buy is going to determine how you are going to price your outputs. So to do these strategic inputs, formulating strategy with regard to inputs, there are strategic cost management tools, there are strategic cost management principles and processes, and there are key performance indicators at various levels. And similarly, strategic cost management at various levels, and finally, you lead to strategic cost management outcomes, which are expressed in terms of how much it is outcomes alignment with customer value. Because ultimately, you want to enhance the customer value. So the outcomes, are they aligned to the customer value? Are they competitive in pricing your products? Have they resulted, the outcomes resulted in the value chain being efficient? Which means there are no wastage, there are no non-value adding activities. Resilient cost structure, the cost structure that you have decided to get these outcomes can remain continuously like this. It should not be fragile, that it falls down with a push from some competitor. So it should have a healthy, robust cost structure and sustainable profitability. Ultimately, the outcome leads to your revenue growth. Is it sustainable revenue? It should not be one time, even if it is a jackpot type of a profit, it has no meaning, because you need a revenue growth in a sustainable manner. So this is the business environment wherein we are talking about strategy with relation to input and strategies with relation to output, linked, facilitated through strategic cost management tools, principles, indicators, etc. So summarizing this, the strategic cost management comprises of the three important segments, components. Strategic position analysis, the very first thing that you try to analyze your business in the context of the business environment, in the context of the globalization, in the context of competition, is a strategic position analysis. And organization's best way of competing to sell the products or services. Position analysis does not mean in terms of the size of the turnover, in terms of size of the factory, in terms of the size of the labor force, not so. To be precise, what is the best way of holding on to your competitive position to sell your products or services? All right. Once you do that, Then you get into operations. You define the activities which will lead to that strategic position analysis. The study of value producing activities. Value for whom? Value to the customer. So the activities which you are going to perform throughout your organization, they must all be focused to a single point, that is the customer's value. In fact, the deciding factor for owning that activities, for performing that activities, the singular one is the customer's value. And from the control point of view, it is this focused issue decides whether that activity needs to be controlled or not to be controlled. If it is not adding value, if it is not adding sufficient value, then to that extent they must be controlled, they must be restricted, they must be reduced. So we are not talking in terms of cost reduction. We are talking in terms of ensuring activities which are reduced because they do not add value. So long they add value to us, now whatever is our cost for that, that is taken to be a part of our cost structure. And these activities encompasses the entire organization, not a single activity which is run in the name of the organization will be left out. It starts from the basic raw materials purchase, acquisition of raw materials, to the final consumer consuming the product or the service. The chain of activities in which the management has a control of either performing or not performing. Because they have the control, because they have the power to decide, it is they who will bear the brunt of any wrong decisions. So the second important component of the strategic cost management, the focus area of the strategic cost management, the core areas of the strategic cost management is a value chain analysis. Once the strategic position analysis and the value chain analysis, which determines which are the activities which you are going to perform within an organization, how you are going to perform, and how best you ensure that they are all adding value to the customers. Once you decide on that, you come down to preparing your cost structure through what are called cost driver analysis. Mind you, why we do link this cost with the activities? Because cost as a standalone has no meaning. It is these activities which are essential to maintain your strategic position, which determines the performance of activities. You don't perform any activity in any organization. You perform specific activities. Now, which are those specific activities which are adding value to the customers? Why should it add value to the customers? Because adding value to the customers lead you to ensure that you are in a position of competitive advantage. Right? So therefore, these activities, once decided to be performed, determine what type of resources are required to perform those activities. It is these resources which constitute your costs. So the costs by themselves do not occur. They occur because you need to perform the activities. So why activities are to be performed? What are the pushing factors for performing activities? Reason deter for those activities is what you mean by driver. So you can talk as activities driver, or in more concrete terms, monetary terms, you can talk as a cost driver. So what are those drivers which drives the consumption of resources? In fact, the word cost is linked to the process of consumption of resources. And activities performed, that means you are consuming resources. The process of consuming resources is a cost. Now you give a monetary value to it, then it becomes cost in an accounting term. But otherwise, the process of consuming resources is the cost. What drives you to consume resources? That is what the cost driver analysis would mean. It's not very simple to say that I'm incurring cost because I need to produce. Then why do you need to produce? Because the customer requires it. Now, how does the customer requires it? So that determines various activities in that. In fact, it is this cost driver analysis linked to the value chain analysis and strategic position analysis led to the emergence of what is well known as activity-based costing. What are the key questions based on these three things? In what markets will we compete? The strategic position analysis, the very first question, which market you are likely to compete? The answer comes from strategic position analysis. How will we position ourselves within these markets? Because the markets comprises of whole issues. There are suppliers of raw materials, there are manufacturers, there are service providers, there are logistics providers, and wholesalers, retailers, and various aspects. All right. So if you look into the entire market, where do you position yourself as an organization, as a company? What will be the basics of our competitive advantage? How do you define your competitive advantage? In terms of turnover, in terms of number of customers, in terms of geographical expanse, in terms of return on capital. So what is the basis of your competitive advantage? That you have an advantage in competition. How will you find out? What specific people, human resources, and then from that to processes and other resources are necessary, other resources are required for consumption, are necessary to successfully compete. These are the key questions that emerges from our earlier three diagram of strategic cost management. Let's understand that why suddenly there was a need for strategic cost management. Obviously, since all of you are mature final students of a very important, significant professional course, you would know that the cost management must have been there right from the day from the business. So why a strategic cost management? The first and the foremost, the almost immediate answer any one of you can give is the limitations of traditional cost management should have confronted such paradigm shifts in business environments that it was not able to provide the requisite information for cost control, cost structuring, and therefore cost management. There is a paradigm shift, not a static business environment. The terms like competitive advantage didn't have much strength because you are in a competitive advantage for years together, especially if you are holding a strong position in a seller's market in a backward countries or not well developed countries to it. You don't need. But today that business environment has shifted. It has become a globalized, and the competition is not only intense, it is uncertain from where the competition would come and in what routes it would come. So you need to go beyond your organizational activities to see the markets, to appreciate your position, to define your competitive advantage. Now, these were not really the cup of tea for the traditional cost management. Right? True, it gave us process control like standard costing. It gave us some input to define the product mix. It gave certain important information for deciding a short-term decision like make or buy, etc. But it went beyond that to decide which market we have to operate. The cost management never addressed. Because in traditional cost management, the decision with regard to what to produce and which market to operate was done independently of cost management. And once the operation starts, the cost structures made it necessary to have a control, which was to some extent considered to be the cost management. Relevance of cost driver analysis. The whole concept of cost structure was focused to the product produced by the organization. Either your goods produced, then what is the price that you are going to fix? What is the cost of the product so that you want to fix the price? Since the volume, the nature of the products, or the place it is produced was the determining factor for all your activities, so the cost was controlled by it. So for 100 tons of output, your cost is X. For 200 tons, you are quite satisfied by saying that it is 2X. Why? Because the focus was not the process which led to the product, but the product itself. Right? Now, why it became irrelevant? Because beyond the product there is a customer. Now, the customer perception to this product has become relevant and significant in the context of a business environment where the customer has the information about other competitors of your business who can provide him more satisfactory products and services. So therefore, the relevance of the cost structuring done under the traditional cost management went out of attention, a meaning. You were pressurized to find out why do you incur a particular cost. So that cost driver analysis becomes very important. And especially after realizing that many of the costs, especially the bulk costs, were totally not related to what production you do it, what product you manufacture, what type of service you give. They were more structural in nature and more executional. What technology you adopt determine what cost you have to incur. So let's take, for example, a textile. There is a handloom textiles and the powerloom textiles. Though of course the handlooms are very less in number in the market, but just for example, now, the moment you decide the technology being handloom, then your cost structure is different. Though the final output could be a shirt, could be a handloom or could be a powerloom. So the output, the customer you are focusing is a person who will wear shirts. But the technology is determining your types of costs. Now, further deconstruct my arguments of this technology into many more folds. You will see that your decision relating to cost have less and less relationship with the type of the output that is going to bring about. It is something different at the micro level to the processes in which you are involved. All right. So therefore, the cost driver analysis becomes important. Finally, in the fast-moving business world, you cannot afford to assume that you can be in a static position. There's nothing like a permanent monopoly. There's nothing like a permanent seller's position in a globalized market. Not because the competition is intense, but more because the unpredictable technology that is impacting the product and the services, and therefore the customer's perspective. And the best example that I can give you is the telecom sector, the IT sector. Look at the way in which the customer's profile perspectives have gone right from a simple mobile in mid-90s to today a complex mobile where you get everything input to it. So it is in such a situation that you have got to ensure that you are in the business and you are in the right position. Obviously, if you are in the wrong position, you will not be in a sustainable position. Right? So therefore, if you take up many organizations, for example, organizations like Flipkart, Snapdeals, etc., finding it quite difficult to see through their business things because their position is shifting. I'm not saying that they have committed a mistake, that is for a different analysis, but then the positioning in the market is a continuous factor to be decided by the management. Now, this strategic position of the organization in the environment of a continuous change in external value chain, okay, largely due to technology. The value chain, what type of supplier you have. Now you assume that your supplier is very good, providing you the quality product, so therefore you fix the supplier once for all. It's not the possible decision anymore, because there are newer and newer innovations taking place. China, for example, is trying to put a challenge to almost every type of a supplier in the world. All right, you cannot straight away reject them, saying for reasons other than the price at which they are able to give you. All right, and the type of input that you are acquiring is determining the type of processes that you can perform within your organization. So therefore, you need to be very careful as to how the supplier's chain from the input side is appropriately linked to the processes that you have strategically decided for your organization to give the strategic outcomes. It is because of these reasons that an alternative to the existing cost management was felt somewhere in late 1980s, which started showing its results by 1990, got consolidated by end of 1990s. So with the advent of the new century, the strategic cost management becomes thoroughly accepted tool in the things. What are the features of this strategic cost management? Right? They integrates cost data with the strategic decision making. That's the most important element of the cost management. Cost information is integrated with strategic decision. When I'm saying integrated, they are not two standalone aspects that you are trying to fuse them, but they are integrated in the sense the entire process of developing cost data is closely linked with the process of making strategic decisions. They're interlinked. All right. The three features are cost analysis for strategic position, gaining competitive advantage, a continuous pursuit through continuous improvement. This is a feature of strategic cost management which is going to run throughout the syllabus. We're not going to talk about costs as given in the financial accounts and say that these costs are to be used for making decision making. No. We are talking about a cost structure which is a part of your total overall strategic decision or positioning yourself and to gain a competitive advantage. Definitely, these cost structure will be compared with an actual cost incurred and find out what is the variations, why the variations occur. So we will have a budgeting based on the activities we plan to produce under the strategic cost management, and then try to find out the variance analysis. So some of the terms that were used in the traditional cost management will continue, obviously, but then their context and the reference and the use will be totally different. Cost analysis, comprehensive enough to cover all aspects of internal. This is a feature of the internal value chain. What do you mean by value chain? That every activity performed, singular, grouped, individually, collectively, team, and organizationally, are linked. What is the linking point? That they all serve the consumer needs. Right? Now, that link is because at each level they are linked sequentially. They're not linked randomly or unstructured manner. Sequentially, they're very structured. Now, in that structure, every activity is generating a value to the customer. Right? Obviously, once I stay like this, so to evolve such a value chain is a challenging task. To maintain such a value chain is yet another challenging task. Why? Because at any point of time, even while you are defining a value chain, you might have included activities which is not adding value, which needs to be identified either at the planning level or at the actual execution level, and to remove them. Once you remove them, you are only through the value chain activities. And the focus of these value chain activities is to your strategies for competitive advantage leading to a position in the markets. Let's begin the three components. The focus of the analysis. It is both external value chain and the internal value chain. Students, we are going to discuss another very important term for chain, what is called supply chain management. That we should discuss it later on, and it's very essential in your mind to bear in things. The difference between supply chain management and the value chain analysis. Value chain analysis is more comprehensive. Supply chain talks of the total process. So in this value chain analysis, there are two types of chain. Value chain external to the organization, that is the suppliers and the customers. Suppliers talks about right from the point from where the raw materials are acquired, and then it goes through various processes which are called value chains till it reaches you as a raw material. At each stage, there are various facts, competitors, business environment, dynamic impact. So the external value chain is equally important. And this external, after the internal goes again external, that is towards the customers, the marketing part of it, the logistics part of it, the channels part of it, till it reaches the final customer. Now, within this, we have an internal. Internal is the traditional. Till 1990s, nobody bothered about outside an organization, except for some terms like economic environment, etc. Not specific terms to identify various customers, various suppliers, and suppliers to suppliers, the origin of raw materials, change in the technology, etc. As against this internal analysis, the activities. Now, highlight profit improvement areas. Once you define these activities, your focus is to improve your revenue growth. Linkage with suppliers, right? What are your linkage with suppliers? The linkage with customers, two important wings of the external outreach. Within the organization, process linkages. There are various processes. Not a single activity will be outside the analysis. Because there cannot be any activity which is not part of value chain analysis in the organization. For every activity is a business activity directed towards the final strategies. And linking across business units, mind you, this is very important area, that the entire gamut of your industry will comprises of different types of businesses. What is how their businesses are linked with you as a supplier, as a logistic provider, as an innovator, as a policy maker, etc. So first of all, you should understand in a value chain analysis, what are the various chains which are involved and how they are linked and why, what type of value they are creating. Vis-a-vis the product or the services with which your organization is involved. What are the steps in this analysis? Identify an industry's value chain. First, the foremost thing, the expertise in today's market and management consultancy area is one of the unique area is identification of industry's value chain. It's not a one-time identification. So therefore, it's a process. Since the business environment is continuously changing, the industry's value chain will also be continuously changing. Once you define industry's value chain, then you are saying, cost and cost to the revenues and assets to value activities. Now, this is with regard to within your organization. What are the costs involved in performing various activities? What are the revenues that these activities will generate directly or indirectly at the end of the outcomes? And assets, what type of assets? Human capital, expertise, skill, innovation, these type of assets, these activities generate. Customer relationship, quality. Then diagnose cost drivers. Diagnose means identify those cost drivers. Which are the factors which influence performing a particular activity in a manner strategically decided and therefore determines the consumption of the resources. There are various permutations in this analysis. Quite obviously, a lot of mathematics are also involved in these aspects. But ultimately, you want to find out which are the drivers because that will determine what is the cost structure. And finally, develop a sustainable competitive advantage through this value chain analysis. Let's give a picture. This is a picture from the book, Shank and Govindarajan's book, Strategic Cost Management of the Paper Industry. Look at the factor that if I can take you to a particular, you see, this is the area where we are talking of an organization, paper manufacturing. So how does the paper manufacturer looks at the whole value chain? Okay, so he has to start from the first one, that is the timber forming. So one can question at the traditional cost management forum that why should you bother about the timber, because timber has nothing to do with directly with my manufacturing activities. I need only pulp. Okay. Now, in fact, if you go into some of the important paper manufacturers in the country, like Balarpur Industries, etc., you will see that over a period of time, they have acquired timber forming activities. They make timber, they log it out, chip it, cut it, and then make pulp and then manufacture. Though, if you take paper industry as a whole, there are business units which are engaged only in pulp manufacturing, specialized pulp manufacturing, specialized in logging and chipping, because that requires, if you go to a country like Norway and all, where this timber is one of the leading industry of the world, then you will be able to see that there are organizations which are exclusively concerned with logging and chipping activities, right? Because there are technology oriented comes, a lot of new technology comes, and then the timber forming. Right. Now, so just for an example, it says that there are competitor B is here, competitor C is here, competitor D is here. So there are different competitors who are operating to it. So this is an upstream value chain analysis. Downstream, if you see, after our manufacturing, we are going to go to converting operations, converting the paper into various usable forms of those paper. Could be cardboard, could be writing paper, could be for printing paper, for newsprint, etc., etc. Where there are could be various other organizations which are existing. That means these would be the immediate customers. But then their customership depends upon further the converting operation to whom they give for distribution, which ultimately goes to the end consumers. So you should focus here. The strategic cost management will focus on the end use customers, his appreciation of the value, and how does this value is impacting the activities all above: distribution, converting, manufacturing, pulp manufacturing, logging and chipping, and timber forming. So it talks about various activities in context of the value chain. It also talks about the probable operators in this value chain, so that it gives you that which are the organizations which are engaged in various of these value chain activities. This is a very simplistic picture. In fact, if you take a complex picture of a real paper products industry, it will go into a very big framework to give you more detail into the paper products industry. But this was just a sample to show you what do we mean by value chain analysis in a comprehensive manner. Mind you, internal value chain for this competitor A, who is in the paper manufacturing, will be confined within his organizations. That's again the internal value chain. So value chain and the strategic management, how do you link it up? Integration with the sustainable competitive advantage. Michael Porter talked of two types of competitive advantage. Low cost. If you are having a low cost for a product, so the market for the product, you can be a cost leadership. So your strategy could be to become a cost leader. Or differentiation. Mercedes, for example, would cost you more, but that product priced more because it has a differentiation to other cars. All right. So the differentiation in your product can be your competitive advantage. So if you are providing product with the differential output customer satisfaction, with a higher level of customer satisfaction, then you are free enough to fix a higher price. So price could be high, but the value is equally high because of differentiation. So two types of value. Value is nothing but the function of the product or service divided by the cost or the price involved. All right. So either you can increase the function, all right, by differentiation, or reduce the cost so that the total value keeps increasing or sustains. Management relative to competitors. No, you don't talk about management of within an organization in relation to types of competitors you have, both in the suppliers market and the downstream market rates. Better value for equivalent costs. All right. So therefore, differentiation, equivalent value at the lower cost. You give the same car, but at a lower cost. So I'm sure there are various industries which you must have confronted by now. We'll give you such very good examples. And then in that value chain where you place yourself is what is known as strategic positioning. Each firm is only a part of the total chain. Overall value chain for each firm is unique. Thank you. With this, I have just given you a brief idea about the strategic positioning and the value chain analysis. We'll take up the cost driver analysis and cost structuring in our next lecture.